Good afternoon, Patriot pals. Thank you for joining me. Have a good day and God bless you. Alright, let's get right into the news here because there's quite to cover on this Sunday. Adam King is 30 registered Democrat and a Republican who served with Nancy Pelosi on the course January 6 show trial commission as they continue to try to hunt down Trump supporters and people who are supporters of America First, and Donald Trump himself. This is the individual who continues to go after America First candidates such as Lauren Boebert. As you guys know, Lauren Boebert recently just won her primary in Colorado by a wide margin over 30 points she carried in her primary, which is fantastic, because you have a wonderful voice to have in Congress. However, Adam King is or couldn't help himself but take digs at Laurenberg, calling her a Christian Taliban because Laura Boebert had suggested that she was tired to church and separate state or etc., etc. Talking about the recent Supreme Court ruling where the judges said that the high school coach in I believe it was Washington could pray at football games. And that's what of course they were all upset by. Of course, Adam Kings are now being fully 100% Democrat, no longer pretending to be Republican, decided to go ahead and trash her, and it says this representative and Kings are trashes. Representative Beaupre calls her the Christian Taliban. Oh, now I think it would rather have more Christian Taliban. That people like Adam Kinguser in Congress, Adam Kinzinger, called on people to oppose Representative Lauren Beaupre by referring to her as a Christian Taliban. Kinguser was upset by Belberg's comments about how the church is supposed to direct the government. There's no difference between this and Taliban. We must oppose the Christian Taliban. I say this as a Christian. Kinguser, who reportedly is a non-denominational Protestant, said in a tweet. And here's his tweet here. There's no difference between this and the Taliban. We must oppose the Christian Taliban. I say this as a Christian, whatever, dude. Of course, the sleazy Never Trumper also shared an article from The Hill about the Congresswoman's speech at a Cornerstone Christian Center in Bolstered, Colorado, where I'm tired of the separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. I was in it wasn't a stinking letter, and it means nothing like they say it does. Barber said the church is supposed to direct the government. Barber, who won the Republican primary this week. And we'll be seeking another term. She defeated her challenger by massive 30 points as Adam Kinguser. Democrats, of course, gerrymandered him. Now the sheet seat, too bad. Adam, Kings are your last term in Congress. Right? And this is what you do. So of course, he comes down here and says we need pastors and we need priests. We need leaders who are going to stand up in front of the pulpit and say we welcome Democrats in our audiences. Well, it's, we churches should welcome Democrats. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. However, most Democrats don't view God as a thing anyway. Any more Democrats absolutely hate God. If we guys remember going back to 2012, during the DNC convention, they voted to eliminate God from their platform. So Democrats don't have no allegiance to God any longer. If a Democratic does come to church, he might actually leave being a Republican. Somebody that has faith in Christ has faith in God and walk away from a Democrat party. But of course I didn't get dessert cannot make that distinction because Adam King deserves cube as 2 is too far gone and his TD's treatment where he can no longer see reality. And so everything has to be aligned with Donald Trump and his worldview. Christian can't just be a Christian. Christian can't just go to church. It must be if you're a Republican and you go to church, you must be at a worshipping Donald Trump church. And that's what Adam Kegs are things. And of course, he continues to track people like Lori Gilbert, Marjorie, Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, etc., etc. And of course, these people have no real allegiance to anything outside of the Democrat Party at this point and the deep state swamp and globalists. So course Adam Kings are once again showing why he is one of the biggest losers in Congress. And then, we know that Biden has been begging oil companies to produce more oil. And he's been attacking gas stations and blaming everything on Vladimir. But what is he really doing? Well, first day in day one office killed the Keystone XL pipeline, and has been crushing domestic production and independence, energy independence, literally since day one. Which by the way, I'm gonna remind you was with assistance from Ag Bill Barr and the DOJ, who before Biden came in, were working even though Barr left a little bit. About a month before by the cat came in his DOJ was already working on all those 17 executive orders that Biden signed on day one. So it was total undermining under the nose of President Trump. But once again, the Biden administration announced a new plan to reduce domestic oil production, this time preventing new offshore oil drilling projects, and both our Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. On Friday, the Department of Interior announced a part of his process to implement a new 5-year plan for offshore oil drilling. The plan could allow a maximum of 11 oil lease sales for offshore drilling, 10 in the Gulf of Mexico, 1 in the Cook Inlet over by Alaska, and/or the next year, and that plan eliminates any new production from the Atlantic and Pacific regions. Folks, let me repeat this, we have huge oceans, to our left and to our right, or as I'm sitting here in the West Coast, or doesn't matter, right? It's here in America. So the West, the Pacific, to the East Atlantic, all that oil outside in the oceans, and they are planning to eliminate any new production from oil in both of our oceans outside of our country. The continental US, but over in Alaska, and the Gulf of Mexico, a few that folks is by design. There's more details of it. But I think you get the gist. I spoke yesterday about how the prices are going to increase not just for food over this 4th of July weekend but also for the fireworks. And I said if you have a fireworks show, they may not be as spectacular as before because the fireworks are so expensive. Well, that's one of the reasons among many that firework displays are being rescheduled or cancelled across the country. There's all kinds of reasons, you know. The leftists hate America. We have this. The Pima County, Arizona Democratic Party throwing an expletive, the 4th event or non-event. Here's what Newsmax reported earlier. Fireworks displays have been canceled or rescheduled in many U.S. cities and counties this year due to supply chain issues, labor shortages, and concerns over potential wildfires, meaning a third straight Independence Day with dark skies for some, according to some news reports. Fireworks shows so far been canceled in Phoenix and Flagstaff, Arizona, North Lake Tahoe, Imperial Beach, California College Park and Ocean City, Maryland, Liquid and Parker, Colorado, Galveston, Texas, and a slew of others. The first two were pandemic-related and this year it's supply chain-related. It's just disheartening. Sweats when city planner said, "We know that the Marxists hate America, and they hate us for loving America and what she used to, and still stands for when you talk to the people. And one of the things that you do, what are the Marxist things in the playbook, is you erase history, you erase patriotism when it comes to any idea of freedom, rights, and you get everyone on board with the collectivist ideal so they can be controlled by the Marxist tyrants. We have a massive caravan at Bacula, Mexico. They left yesterday and they're on their way to the United States border. And if you look at the picture, there's several people analyzing this. It is mostly comprised of military-aged men. We have once again another invasion of the force coming in with a red carpet rolled out by Biden and his cronies. And of course, like as I reported before, Brett Kavanaugh screwed us over, because he sided with the Now We Know, been proven for the last 10-12 years now. Plus, that Justice Roberts has really left this. Kavanaugh sided with Justice Roberts in the Supreme Court this week, and they overturned the Remain in Mexico policy. And now we have this new and visionary force. I'm looking at a picture here, folks. And there's 4, I'm looking at the first 4 rows and I see one petite woman. Another questionable, and this one might be a woman. Everyone else looks like a man but in their 20s and 30s. And there's a whole slew of them coming. Now, of course, President Trump initiated the Remain in Mexico. And that was one of the great things that helped curb, because we know that like 1.6%, very low percent of the asylum claims are actually legitimate. That means 90% of placebos. People should not be coming in because they don't have actual legitimate asylum claims. Reuters was reporting thousands of people set off on foot from southern Mexico Friday, too undeterred in their efforts to reach United States even after the deaths of at least 53 migrants in Texas. This week highlighted the danger was facing many migrants, the group mostly of young men from Central America, Venezuela, and Cuba, included families walking with children and babies and strollers, so mostly young men. But they did, I'm looking at the first few rows that would make sense of the word children and babies. These guys don't care about women and children, at least in other people's women and children. They're in the front of the line. Babies and strollers, wow. Alright. But here's the crazy thing, folks, let's get into some putting your thinking caps here. Let's talk about our government and how this can be cured. It can be cured. One of the reasons why Obama with his selective remember this unaccompanied minor problem started by design under Obama. What we're seeing with Joe Biden is essentially the third term of Barack Hussein Obama, the presidential whisper in the basement talking into Joey's ear. That's when we started getting the unaccompanied minors, and this flood because they had selective enforcement of the laws. Can you imagine if your local police department, they do this, but it overtly said we are no longer going to, if someone comes in and violates your wife, we've decided that that's something we're not going to put prosecutorial assets behind. If that happens is too bad. We're just going to let that slide. That's essentially what's already happening under the lawless Obama. Representative Carlos Jimenez of Florida was asked about the EPA ruling, or the Supreme Court said the EPA does not have all of his obvious overreaching power, one of the great rulings along with Roe v. Wade, that we got from the Supreme Court, which are really important. It sucks that they overturned Remain in Mexico, because for me, those are three of the big issues and it's only got two of them, right? He says, and he puts the blame where it shouldn't be Congress. Our representatives have not done what they need to do to protect us and to pass laws. And therefore they've let the executive branch get too big and make laws which are not supposed to do. Congress has not done a good job and established exactly what it wants. And it gives way too much power and delegates way too much to the bureaucrats, the unelected bureaucrats. When you take control back in the Congress, I think that's what this ruling kind of indicates. This is a congressional issue, is that Congress did not give you that power. And you just can't assume the Congress gave you that power. He's referring specifically to the EPA power, but then he goes on to say, and look, a great example will be what we have to do with the decision with REM in Mexico, right? The Supreme Court said, yeah, it's an executive decision, they can overturn an executive decision. We give way too much power to the executive. And he says he's going to introduce legislation to enshrine Remain in Mexico into U.S. immigration law. I don't know if that's going to be successful or not. But that's what they need to be working on, making laws, not letting the executive branch do it. Now, it's interesting how the Supreme Court upheld that the executive branch can undo an executive branch order of Remain in Mexico, but President Trump couldn't undo the DACA program. Such inconsistency and lawlessness continues in high places. New York Governor Kathy Hochul yesterday signed into law a bill that limits concealed carry of firearms in sensitive locations. Okay. She literally said, "Screw you, Supreme Court. Doesn't matter what you said and overruled. I am going to sign a law that goes against the constitutional rights that are guaranteed and also that had been upheld by the Supreme Court. Now, of course, I am for states' rights. Don't get me wrong. But the states' rights cannot supersede the Constitution, the United States of America, that is binding for everyone within the United States, all 50 of our states and the District of Columbia." The U.S. Supreme Court last Thursday struck down New York's century-old law on carrying concealed weapons prior to the Supreme Court's Thursday ruling the state could decide who wanted to have this right and who it didn't. Clarence Thomas wrote it violates the 14th Amendment by preventing law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their right to keep and bear arms. Hopes will sign the new gun control legislation despite the Supreme Court's ruling. Quote, "The new law lays out a strict licensing process to obtain a concealed carry permit and a list of locations deemed sensitive, including Times Square, where firearm possessions will be illegal, according to legislative text. The areas defined as sensitive include government-owned buildings, schools, healthcare facilities, places of worship and public transportation. People who carry a gun in a prohibited location can be charged to the family in law, which means that where are the criminals who don't follow the law going to have illegal guns, or why don't know, in sensitive places, like Times Square, government-owned buildings, schools, healthcare facilities, places of worship, public transportation. These people aren't stupid. It's by design, because they have bodyguards, and they have security that is allowed to have guns in these places. But you little people can't. At least we've got some folks, we got a lot of battles going on in the states because of the Supreme Court actions. This has been one of the most memorable and historic Supreme Court sessions in my lifetime. I mean, Roe v. Wade alone makes the dat psych. But the Supreme Court upholding essentially constitutional carry is huge. Now that's the sexism. The Texas Supreme Court has stepped in to stop some madness. They have given the go-ahead for the state to enforce laws that ban pregnancy termination. And this is blocking efforts that barred the law from going into effect after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned 1973 as Roe v. Wade. So what happened was Friday, the Supreme Court allowed the state's long-standing pre-Roe ban to take effect by blocking a lower court that said that clinics could continue performing the procedure admitted midnight on the Friday night Saturday morning of a holiday weekend. The Texas Supreme Court released its ruling that a total ban can be enforced in the state of Texas. Never seen anything like this. Well, not since 1973. If you recall, last week on Tuesday, Judge Christina Weems in Harris County had issued a temporary restraining order to block the enforcement of the 1925 Texas law that banned the practice unless of course required to save the mother's life. And of course, we have the Texas Heartbeat Act as well. So Texas gets a huge mark for me, as I decided I'm going to Texas or Florida as being a state that their state Supreme Court upheld as it should be. Our Supreme Court. Let's get some tech news, which is going to segue us into Trump news. Zuckerberg is selling employees that he's turning up the heat as Facebook braces for massive layoffs have made one of the worst economic downturns in recent history. Okay, right now dozens of major companies have announced plans to X their workforce. Things are gonna get very brutal. It's been especially brutal in the tech sector. Meta, Facebook is dying on the vine. People are just sick of what they're doing. But it is interesting to hear a big person in the tech world say that they're turning up the heat, because they are bracing for one of the worst economic downturns in recent history, to rival or perhaps be 2008. It seems like because the inflation, it could be 2008. But the housing things and other things may not be as bad. We'll see. Now, also in tech news, Google announced Friday it would delete users' location history when they visit pregnancy termination clinics, domestic violence shelters, and other places where privacy is sought. All of a sudden Google cares about privacy. So they're going to delete your location history if you visited one of these places, domestic violence shelters. Hey, how about this? Delete all our history of where we've been. By the way, you can turn that off. It's not easy, but you can find instructions to turn it off. Not that I believe that it completely turns it off, but by default, people just agreed to yeah. And they track everywhere you're at. I was trying to find something someplace. I had been in Europe. And I went into Google. And sure enough, it told me the exact place I had gone to. It was Australian food restaurant, in an inn. Where was it? There was in another lens. I don't think it was out somewhere. It was not in Amsterdam, was on her way to Belgium. But anyway, I was able to find where that place was. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I had opted out of the history. And I don't think I'd find it. But there you go. Google is now going to delete users' location history, because all of a sudden now they care about privacy, but only in that realm. And who knows if it's true? They'll keep that information, probably in their servers. Alright, a federal grand jury in New York is going after Trump and Trump's social media firm. Donald Trump's social media company and some of his employees received subpoenas from a federal grand jury in New York and securities regulators. Trump's social media company and some employees received these subpoenas from both a federal grand jury and security regulators, according to a public disclosure Friday, possibly delaying or even killing a deal promising a cash infusion needed to take on Twitter. Trump Media Technology Group received a subpoena from a grand jury in New York and Securities and Exchange Commission, according to a securities document filed by Digital World Acquisition Corp on Friday. Digital World has plans to buy Trump Media, releasing $1.3 billion for its fledgling business, but the deal is unlikely to be done during legal probes. Meanwhile, Parler was cut off by AWS, and what looks like a coordinated monopoly. Monopolistic collusion by big tech than their little oligarchy. And of course, there was nothing that the regulators did on that. Because, we can have a pro-Trump social media company fighting or competing in an open market with Twitter, Facebook, etc. So, Trump Media's chairman was among the players who received subpoenas. Now on Monday, Digital World announced that it received subpoenas from the same grand jury convened by Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office, so they are just trying to go after Trump any which way they can. And which leads us into Trump and his great way of trouncing J6 rhino backstabbers. In this case, I'm talking about President Trump endorsing former Arizona State Senator David Farnsworth for Arizona State Senate in the 2022 primaries. Now, this wouldn't really be a story except for he's doing this because he's trying to block Arizona House Speaker Rhino Rusty Bowers. Now, I don't report on it really here on this platform. We do cover this extensively, the aftermath of 2020 in Arizona, Wisconsin, GA, etc. On our The Aftermath of the Battle is still going on, or the last couple years, even though on this platform we're supposed to pretend like that battle is one done and already settled. Rusty Bowers was a guy that just was in the form of Trump and the Patriots side in Arizona and tried to reveal what really happened, and he is a man who warmly embraced Liz Cheney, as did Cassie Hutchinson, after testifying at the sham J6 hearing. So Rusty stabbed Arizona in the back when he was Rusty as a state representative, and they have term limits there. So he's now running for the state Senate and President Trump is blocking him. So as Trump endorsed Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake now, but here's where it gets interesting is how President Trump words this. So he made a statement, which was tweeted out. He tweeted out but also gets carried up on Twitter as one of those Trump statements. David Farnsworth is going against a longtime political app operative or hack Rusty Bowers, who has been an absolute disaster for Arizona and everything which Arizona values represent. Bowers fought in the whole 2020 topic, I'm talking about. In fact, the rhinos of the state, headed by Bowers and his group, were far worse than the Democrats, because they never knew where they were coming from. Bowers must be defeated and highly respected. David Farnsworth is the man to do it. He will straighten things out. Now this is where it's important. And this is where it's pure Trump. This is a very important raise because it will determine the future of Arizona, which is now on the precipice of disaster, with illegal aliens pouring in at every level, and those who make the selections for our representatives being subjected to losing their voice. This is where I live as pure Trump. David Farnsworth will get rid of the stench of Rusty Bowers and his crew of rhinos who are systematically destroying everything that Arizona stands for. He is a puppet of Governor Doug Ducey, a man who was totally afraid to act on so many important issues. I love it when Trump trounces, he calls him a puppet of Governor Doug Ducey. And he says that the new guy will get rid of the stench, the rhino stench. Okay, let me tell you how the people at the top are secretly making so much money, it makes your head spin. Okay, so we know that they're money laundering through Ukraine. We're now up to $63 billion to a non-NATO country in aid and other things to Ukraine, who is not a NATO. We have no reason to give them. Okay, let's say you agree with NATO, they are not NATO. $6,360+ billion over their biggest money laundering scheme right before our eyes we've ever seen. Stimulus money, aid money, solar panels, money for jabs, all kinds of things. Our money is being wasted on, right? Okay, so what has the Fed done? They started to increase the interest rates. Now, let me tell you something that's going on. There's something called cash holdings that the Fed does. This is literally like risk-free money. You put money into the Fed holds these cash reserves, and no one's making money on it. Before, money would just be parked there. But because inflation is going up, and the Fed is trying to curb inflation by increasing interest rates. Here's what's going on. The Fed actually pays money to that money that's parked at the Fed. Most of these people parking money of Fed while the institutions are secret. We don't know who they are. We know that there's some fat hedge funds and some other money managers and in Wall Street money. But a lot of stuff is these are private secretly. Not always just closed entities. There's only Right now there's a record $2.3 trillion in cash holdings on hand within the Federal Reserve's repo facility. And there are a total of only 108 depositors who hold the assets in the fund. They are the recipients of this interest payout. Now, with the record $2.33 trillion in cash parked at the Fed's overnight facility. It's now at 1.55%. So how much are we paying out in interest payments to these 108 secret depositors every single day? $100 million is every single day. The secret depositors on average are making almost $1 million per depositor every single day just for parking their $2.33 trillion in cash with the Fed. So the regular consumer, for the most part is getting crunched with. We're all getting crushed with inflation and then high interest rates. But these people are making a killing and we don't know who they are. Now, the Fed's front rate is going to go at 1.75. And within 6 months, we're told is going to go up to 3.5. So they're going to be making 200 and paying out 200 million per day to these 108 depositors. They'll be making millions of dollars a day. Folks, I don't know about you, but $1 million a day going to increase to $2 million a day, more or less for the next 6 months. That is currently, what, 350 million plus just in interest payments, totally risk-free. The only risk you have is when that they have because we can't participate in this. Supposedly some of us might have some money in some of these funds. But have you gotten any interest payments on this? $1 million a day, soon to be $750,000. That would be throw out $750 million annually just on payments that most of us can't participate in. And now you know another way the rich get absolutely richer under the misery and tyranny of the tyrants, and the poor continue to get decimated with that secret tax called inflation. Thanks for being here, folks.